On the morning of February 24th, 2023, emergency responders arrived at a quiet suburban home to find a chaotic and bloody scene. Inside the Herndon, Virginia residence, they discovered two victims. Christine Banfield was suffering from fatal stab wounds, and a stranger named Joseph Ryan was dead from multiple gunshots. Christine was a 37-year-old mother and a dedicated pediatric intensive care nurse. Two people survived the carnage unscathed: Christine's husband, Brendan Banfield, and the family's 21-year-old live-in au pair from Brazil, Juliana Perez Magalhães. To the arriving officers, the setup seemed obvious. A violent intruder had broken into the home, and the family fought back. Brendan told police he walked in on the stranger attacking his wife with a knife. He said he shot the man to defend her, and that Juliana then grabbed a second firearm and fired another shot. Brendan was a federal agent working for the IRS. He had specialized training, he was authorized to carry a weapon, and his account of a home defense scenario carried immediate, heavy institutional weight. The emotional toll of the morning was heavy. The Banfield's 4-year-old daughter was downstairs in the basement during the attack, and police body cams captured Brendan sobbing into his blood-stained hands. But dispatch records showed a troubling gap. Someone inside the house had dialed 911, hung up after a brief groan, and then waited 15 full minutes before placing a second call to report the stabbings. The survivors told a compelling story of a husband trying to save his family, but the physical evidence left in the bedroom pointed to a completely different sequence of events. 8 months into the investigation, detectives uncovered that Brendan and Juliana were engaged in an intense, secret romantic affair. A digital forensic examination of Christine's personal devices revealed a hidden profile on a fetish website operating under the name Anastasia9. Brendan and Juliana had used this fake profile to catfish Joseph Ryan. They convinced Ryan he was invited to the house to act out a violent, non-consensual home invasion fantasy. The messages explicitly instructed Ryan that the front door would be unlocked and that he needed to bring his own knife. Ryan was an unwitting pawn. There was no random attack. He was lured into the home specifically so he could be framed for Christine's murder. The prosecution's case hinged on the physical findings of forensic analyst Iris Dallygraph, who examined the blood spatter on Brendan Banfield's jeans. Brendan maintained that the blood got on his clothing because he was kneeling on the floor, desperately trying to render medical aid to his dying wife. If he had been rendering aid, analysts expect to find transfer stains, large smears created when clothing presses against a wet surface. Instead, Graph identified a linear distribution of small, circular blood droplets running up Brendan's right leg. These droplets are cast-off spatter, formed when a moving object, like a bloodied knife, is swung through the air, flinging blood onto the attacker. Furthermore, ribbon-like transfer marks on Joseph Ryan's hands indicated his body was dragged and repositioned while the blood was wet. The forensic science contradicted the self-defense narrative. The cast-off droplets proved Brendan was the active stabber, while the transfer stains showed the scene was deliberately staged. In October 2023, authorities arrested Juliana. Almost a year later, Brendan was also taken into custody. Facing severe charges, the two turned on each other. Juliana accepted a plea deal, agreeing to serve 10 years for manslaughter in exchange for testifying against her former partner. In January 2026, Brendan Banfield faced trial for double murder in Fairfax County. Taking the witness stand, Juliana testified she crouched behind the bed, covering her eyes while listening to Brendan stab his wife. Brendan later took the stand in his own defense, claiming he only fired his weapon to de-escalate the situation and save Christine. The loyalty between the two completely dissolved as the trial progressed, leaving Brendan to defend his fabricated timeline alone. The jury took little time to decide. They found Brendan Banfield guilty of aggravated murder and child endangerment. The conviction carries a mandatory sentence of life in prison. The plot ended the lives of two innocent people, a nurse devoted to saving children, and a stranger manipulated into a fatal trap to serve a fabricated romance. And because of the conspiracy, a 4-year-old girl who sat in the basement listening to the violence is now effectively left without parents. Brendan Banfield spent months planning a digital alibi and a staged crime scene, but he was ultimately convicted by the microscopic droplets of blood that he left on his own clothes.